We will talk about massive distributed data, the future of space research.
Thank you, Vito. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure for me to be here and talk to you about the topic of big data in its implementation in the universe of NASA. So where we are talking about an endeavor aimed at exploring the solar system and beyond. So this is a field that is very much dominated by data. In fact, it's first of a kind, never acquired before, very, very precious data, which is collected for the purpose of distributing to the international community and to the public. So I want to give you an overview at a very high level of the flow of data in my environment and just touch upon the few fundamental things that might characterize them, but also show how common certain issues might be to other areas of research. And so typically, being NASA, we have instruments deployed in space. We have observational systems with scientific instruments, although we might have assets also airborne and ground-based. And data is first acquired on board. There is a minimal processing that depends on the situation, and then it is sent to Earth. And in the case of Earth science missions or astrophysics missions that happen with asset on Earth orbit, it's sent through interventions of relay satellites. In the case of interplanetary systems that are designed to explore anything beyond the moon, it's through help of the Deep Space Network. So here is the transmission with its bottlenecks and constraints. And then there is, in the universe of NASA, there is the processing of the data in the archives. And those are specifics to the missions. This is where there is the assembly, the validation of the data, and then it is distributed to the communities. From that point on, users access the data to do all sorts of spatial analysis and manipulation that depends on user-specific interests. And this is where we have the analytics. So let's talk about characteristic of this data. I've talked about Earth science missions, astrophysics missions, planetary science missions. So in Earth science, we have a lot of spacecraft orbiting the Earth. They have been doing so and working remarkably well for a long time. So we are acquiring data. We have actually terabytes of data out there. We have actually petabytes. It's accruing now in the petabytes, and it's moving with a velocity of petabytes a year that are added. That's the size here, volume and velocity for Earth science. Earth science data is extremely heterogeneous, so there is variety that is also an issue. And more, Earth science data is delivered not just to the community of scientists that operate within the disciplines, the confines, but it's becoming of interest to people who operate in the regional and local management of resources, such as water or power, energy. Professor Bertino alluded to this in her talk, so there is very much this characteristic with earth science. In astrophysics, there we have the newer telescopes are increasingly going for larger and larger bandwidths of observations. So the data that is accruing is progressively increasing. There is a project that is more or less in the books for the early in the next decade, which is the square kilometer array, which consists of a large ground-based array installation. And if that goes, we would be looking at exabyte type of data volumes. So astrophysics is looking to be even bigger than what it is today. It has a lot of interest in acquiring this huge volume of data, and because there are often some transients, the huge data is coupled in this case with the need for real-time acquisition, otherwise an event would be lost. In planetary science, we are looking now at the NASA archive of close to 200 terabytes. And of course, data is increasing. Planetary science has aspects that are a little bit different from the other two domains in that often the instruments are very constrained. We are talking about a spacecraft hundreds of millions of miles away from Earth. They have very limited resources. They have to acquire. They have limited onboard resources. They have to transmit. There are limited bandwidths. So the world of planetary science has this peculiarity. Again, there is a lot of variety because instruments are, increasing in scope. They are increasing in sophistication for what they can return. And another peculiarity of the work of NASA is that all of these data systems are developed around specific missions without ever having in mind issues of reuse or interoperability or growth. And that's because of the way the funding cycle moves. And that's going to be an issue, of course, as we move forward. So is this a big data problem? Yes, it definitely is. So we are challenged with being in a situation where the data that we need, the data that is projected to be acquired, collected, and then processed and managed exceeds the capacity and capabilities of the existing systems. So this requires new thinking, and it requires looking at issues of scalability of architectures, scalability of infrastructure, algorithms, other tools, things that need to come together in a manner that we haven't seen happen yet. How is this relevant to a community as diverse as the one that I am addressing today? There are a large number of characteristics that are really not discipline specific. And so solutions are bound to be useful outside of my universe. And this also implies the duality of looking out to other communities to search for a solution. And it's a very relevant problem to many communities. So I've been talking about changing the way we approach this. And in order to do that, my organization, together with others, has been realizing that a new approach requires a lot of new research. And so a new field is emerging that we call data science. So what is data science? To understand what data science is, it's helpful to decompose the problem into its pieces by talking about the entire data life cycle. And I'll be talking about the life cycle in the context of NASA, but I think that it's definitely more general than that. And here is the main characteristics of the data life cycle. They are illustrated as a flow from the point of acquisition on board a spacecraft through what could be, processing on board, triage to determine what to measure, what to keep, to data compression, then transmission to Earth, through processing, distribution, data mining, visualization, in order to eventually do all of the analyses and the inferences that are necessary and that drive ultimately the acquisition of new knowledge, which is what we are about. So these pieces are all interconnected. And so the decisions that are made in any of these points, so to speak, are going to influence the flow, not just downstream, but also upstream. It's really an interconnectedness that drives the entire parameter space here of these solutions. And so decisions here are going to be guided depending on the interests of the type of problems at hand. And I'm going to illustrate a few as we move along in this very limited amount of time. So in particular, for NASA, so what are three key challenges and corresponding type of solutions? Well, there is one challenge that has to do with the amount of data to be collected at the source. It's simply becoming too much, particularly in planetary science, as I mentioned earlier. This is forcing us to look downstream at new way of doing computation on board the spacecraft. Not just in terms of increasing the capacity of the resources, but in terms of increasing the smarts. So in other words, the future is looking to onboard the computing with decision-making, autonomous decision-making without humans in the loop. This is going to be very, very difficult. Right now, if you ask any scientists in planetary science, would they want to have a computer decide what type of observations are going to happen, steer an instrument, point an instrument, do triage on board, they would be horrified because every little bit is so precious that there is a very strong barrier against not being in control. And there are a lot of communities also that need to share all of these very valuable and limited resources. But that has got to be the way of the future downstream. Second challenge here, and this applies at the stage of we are on the ground and we are dealing with massive type of data coming in real time, exceeding the capacity, not just of storage, but of processing and distribution. This is a real big bottleneck. The type of solutions that are emerging here are manifold, from solutions in the hardware domain, looking at low power computation on the ground. I'm primarily talking about all the banks of correlators that are required in the signal processing here, through data triage to understand when do we want to even observe and keep the data. We are just not able, we won't be able to do the type of post-processing that is done today in the future. So we will have to be smarter about what to let go. And the third one, this is applicable particularly in the domain of earth science, where progressively, because of the maturity of the field, we are seeing that whereas in the past every mission worked in itself, there was a community looking at the data type because it was, an hydrology community data or an atmospheric science community data or whatever. Progressively, the Earth is now studied as a system. And so it is realized that all of the data must be looked at together and together with other correlative data as well as output from computer models. Where this is going is we are at a stage where the analysis of the data and the process study is really now getting to a point where our understanding is more refined and we want to be able to predict better. So the coming together of the data with the computer models is already getting established, and it's the way of the future. This means data moving in lots of points, so extreme distributions here, and need to analyze it in real time if it is for the prediction of hazards, of natural hazards. So this is going to be the way of the future, and data analytics are going to be extremely useful there, becoming extremely sophisticated. So where all of this is going is identifying that there is the sense that the stopiping is definitely the way of the past. The way of the future is the coming together of different disciplines, different expertise, different solutions, different way of thinking. So I want to give you just one level down in terms of details, which I think is sort of cool, as we would say. And that is, I was talking about the necessity to do autonomous computing in the context here of, in the future, autonomously guide flyby of a comet. So there are, of course, no autonomous navigation, never mind of comets, done these days, but these results illustrate the efforts of some colleagues at JPL who have been looking at training algorithms with sequences of past flyby, and in this particular case, it's the flyby of Comet Hartley 2, which was encountered a couple of years ago by the Epoxy mission. And so here, if I can make it go, which doesn't seem possible. Here. So this was working when we tried it. I might have to abandon this for the sake of time. Did you see it? Okay. 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 So you realize that I have no visibility right here where I'm clicking. So I have been clicking a lot, but all right. So this is the original flyby that happened 2 years ago. So, and the sequence was used for training. This is the outcome of a robust tracking algorithm that was particularly successful here. The SMART is being able to fix on the centroid of the comet. The next one is an algorithm for plume detection called in jargon a software coronagraph, where the object is first acquired, then it is masked in this case, so that we are able to look at the outgassing plumes. And the third one is an algorithm that looks at the spots on the body that have a very high albedo contrast corresponding to desirable surface features. So here is one example, and the other example, very quickly, is now from the world of radio telescopes that are looking at transients, such as in this case, the ability to detect an intermittently radiating pulsar, that is depicted on the left there, and the signal comes across as that jungle of signals and noise on the top corner at the right-hand side. So how do we detect that transient and are able to leave out the noise, which would take, if we were doing this in post-processing, a very, very long time, a prohibitively long time. So algorithms here have been developed to do robust identification of these sequences, and we are showing here the outcome of one of these research algorithms on the top right corner. So I've spoken about data science at JPL, and I have illustrated all the, I've hoped that I've made the point that data is a system, it has a life cycle, it requires new thinking around a number of aspects. It requires then new professional figures, experts in the interdisciplinary nature of this science. We have spoken, I've heard Professor Bertino talk about interdisciplinarity between, let's say, the expert in genomics and computer science. I would say we need interdisciplinarity also amongst the many flavors of computer science. So it's several levels down in terms of granularity here, as well as the classical disciplines. So at JPL, we see emerging new researchers who need to be at ease in the world of, say, astrophysics and expert systems and computer software and so on and so forth, and correlator needs. And I think that just to leave this thought with this group, it's important that the academia think about the curriculum of these interdisciplinary type of scientists that the future is going to need across the board. JPL has recognized that big data is upon us. It's important, it poses problems. We are looking for solutions. We are not looking for solutions within ourselves. We have been reaching out to our campus, to our sister organization, but we have also reached out to other communities that we have not touched before, such as NIH, because some of the thinking that has been going on in the last few years is really more general in nature, and there is the hope here that it's a call to the funding agencies to look at a new model where agencies might be looking to fund together in a way that is well orchestrated, well thought out, the various pieces that are needed. Another thing that I want to leave you with is that we have had this summer our first Big Data Summer School on Data Analytics with a lot of participants. So I hope some of you might be in our future involved with us. And with this, I thank you for your attention.
Okay, next speaker is Antonio Mas.